My name is Charleen Stroud and I'm a ceramicist by training. Um, Basically grew up in South Africa and studied fine arts, did my master's in ceramics. But the piece that's on the exhibition is actually an embroidered piece, and I think it's something that I'm exploring at the moment.
Great. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you came to do an embroidery piece from your ceramics training?
So we immigrated to Canada about 17 years ago, and I did a bit of ceramics. We lived in Cranbrook, and I did a little bit of ceramics there for a few years. And then we moved to Vancouver 3 or 4 years ago, and I didn't have access to a pottery kiln. So I ended up doing an embroidery workshop with Bettina on chain stitch, and then I did a workshop through Maiwa as well with a British artist, Sue Stone, and it was an embroidery workshop. I was actually just looking for something that was creative. I've always done needlework. My mother was a seamstress, so it was accessible. It was easy for me to be able to go to that. I mean, I'm not an embroiderer by any means, and so basically I just winged it through the through the course. But I really enjoyed. I had to do research on photographs. We had to take a photograph, and that's basically what started it off. Yeah. What inspires me to make art? Well, I think having done art from small, from little, my parents, we always had art around. My dad was a stonemason, my mother the seamstress. So we grew up with it. School, we did art at school. I don't think I intended when I went to university to actually do three-dimensional work. I think you go to university a lot of the times wanting to do painting or printmaking, but I think just touching the clay and working with it, it just gets you going. So I ended up, I do a lot of three-dimensional stuff, and even though I'm really enjoying the embroidery, I don't think I'll stop with it because I'm working on 2 new pieces at the moment. I do miss the ceramics. So for 3 years in Vancouver, I haven't had access to a kiln. I finally now do, so I'm on the verge of starting new stuff. I'm a bit nervous because I'm a bit inhibited, I think. Having studied it, you sort of pressurized to do it properly, whereas with embroidery there is no pressure, because I don't really know stitches and stuff. I just do what I want to do. But with ceramics it's a bit different. You want to do it perfectly. You don't want stuff cracking. You don't want, so it is harder to get going. Yeah, but I have some ideas. I also have some ideas of trying to combine the two, the embroidery and the ceramics. I've started teaching a few students, so that's also, students I think inspire you because they're so energized and energetic. So yeah, that's what hopefully will happen. Do I see myself as part of a community? At the moment in Vancouver, not really, because I am not in contact with that many ceramic artists. I've yet to really get involved with them, partly for my own problem, but I think it is important to have contact with people who are in the same field as you, because you can bounce ideas off them. And I did want to, when I originally came, I wanted to get into a studio where there were other people working. And I did try, but it's very hard to get into a studio. There's just no openings anywhere. And ceramics, having a kiln involved is a little bit more problematic than a printmaker or a painter. So yeah, I think it is important to keep contact with people that are in your field. Even if you're not working with them, but to get together every now and then, maybe discuss the pieces that you're working on. So that you can get some type of feedback from other people, because you might just have forgotten something and somebody mentions something and it triggers it, a thought or an idea. So I think it is important to, have that community around you. I think it's very important culturally to continue with your, I would say, forefathers, your ancestors, your grandparents, your whatever. I think it is important to be in that environment and to keep those traditions going. I mean, I just think the society at the moment is so pushed for time. Everybody's racing along, and any art form, craft form is time consuming. I don't think there's anything that is just instantaneous. Even performance art, it's the preparation for performance art, there's quite a bit involved. It's not just the performance. And for me anyway, the actual physical work, it's important. And anything that's physical, jewelry, ceramics, whatever, it's time consuming. So yeah, I think the knowledge of our predecessors is important. How you use it and what you do with it, I think it depends on the person. But I think we wouldn't be where we are today if we didn't continue the various traditions from where we come from. I'm not a techno junkie. I try and steer away from anything that is computer related and stuff like that, but inevitably we don't have much of a choice. I think for me, I don't work on the computer a lot. I'm not on any, I don't use any platform at the moment for my work at all. But I think we have to just use it because it makes it easier, like using a photograph, blowing it up on a computer or on a printer, using that. As far as using it actually in my work and manipulating stuff with it and making it part of it, it doesn't really interest me. For me, it's about actually physically working with my hands and actually doing it myself. And I know there's a huge debate going on in society about artists that actually are well-known artists who don't actually physically make the work themselves. My sister and I have had many conversations about it. She did her thesis on it, and the importance for me of actually the artist actually making the work themselves, producing it themselves, not only just managing it. Because a lot of artists that you see, you think they've actually done the painting, or you think that they've done that sculpture, but they haven't actually done it. They haven't even touched it. So for me, that physical contact is very important. Yeah. So technology, it plays a small role in my life. Even my kiln, it's not even a digital. I don't even have a digital, thing on it. It's I've got a thermocouple. Most of the time, I just fire with a cone. So I have a guide cone. I have to judge what the temperature is. I suppose I'm crazy, but when I'm firing, I'm obsessed. I go and check it every hour, and then when it gets close to the temperature, I go every 15 minutes, It's just, I suppose it's the way that I've grown up, and I don't want to let go. I'm a little bit of a control freak when it comes to that, I don't always trust it. And with the kiln that's going up to 1260 Celsius, you can't just leave it and go away. But I mean, with modern stuff you can, I suppose. I'm not quite there yet. So I think just the community, the family I grew up in was very artistic. I think in the sense that there was always artistic stuff going on, like sewing. My aunt was a seamstress, my mom was a seamstress, my dad is a stonemason. So we always had people creating stuff and building stuff, and so yeah, I think it has shaped my life in terms of the fact that I can't imagine it without it. People will say, do you create all the time? Well, I don't necessarily create an artwork as in an embroidered piece or a ceramic sculpture, but I think I'm always creative in terms of baking, cooking, in the garden, just constantly doing that type of creative thing. So growing up in the family that I grew up, yes, there was a lot of creativity. I think also growing up in South Africa, the community, the environment that I grew up in, very creative people in terms of the native people painted their houses. There was always weaving going on, you know. So yeah, I think I grew up in an environment where people were always doing things creative. So when I first arrived in Canada, we lived in Cranbrook, which we have a house there that has the most beautiful view of the Rockies. And I've always worked on figurative stuff because I taught figure drawing at university. All my sculptural pieces are figurative, female figures. So when we moved, there was this fantastic landscape, the Rockies, the mountains. For a while, I'd say for 6 months, a year, I sort of tried focusing on the environment I was in with the landscape and the uniqueness of the mountains around me. But I think inevitably I've gravitated back to the female figure. Maybe because I'm comfortable with it. I don't know. I did a residency in Medicine Hat at Medalta. And we were sort of inspired there and encouraged to change from what we were doing. Because I was there for a month and they sort of said, try something new. And so I started a different series where I worked on ceramic pieces that were inspired by the pottery kiln, the bottle kilns that they have there. And I was creating these sculptural shapes that I called smokestacks that sort of looked a bit like a bottle kiln, but also looked a little bit human. They sort of had little tripod legs and stuff. But inevitably, I've gone back to the figure. The figure has always been the most important. So I think as far as the materials is concerned, I use what I have. The embroidery cotton that I have, I've got a hell of a lot of it because we were on holiday in Nova Scotia when like I think 3 years or 4 years after we got here, and there was a craft shop that was closing down, and they had all this embroidery thread that they were selling. So we bought the whole lot. So I'm sitting with all this embroidery thread that I have been wondering what I was going to do with it. So I have those materials that are available to me. The 2 fabric pieces that are here are actually a tablecloth that my mother crocheted, and it's quite sacrilege, I think, to say that I've cut it up into 3 pieces. But rather that than it sit in a cupboard and nobody actually sees it. So as far as that's concerned, the materials for ceramics, clay is clay, you know. I mean, there's so many different types, but I like the fact that the material is malleable, you know, and there are so many different ones, which is in some ways problematic now because I need to find something that I really like working with. I know that there were South Korean potters here 2 years ago, I think. They came and they were doing a demonstration, and the clay that they were using, they couldn't find a clay that could do what they were doing in South Korea with the clay. And I have found the same. When I was trying to do my bigger sculptures in Cranbrook, I found that the clay wasn't, we call it toothy enough. It's just not, even though it's strong, it can't withstand the paddling and the manipulation of it. It sort of gets soft and floppy. So I've yet to discover something that is, you know, what I know. Yeah, and then I think living on the West Coast, a lot of people are inspired by the landscape, by the uniqueness of the West Coast, the trees, the forests, you know. I'm more inspired by the people, the shapes of the people. So yeah, that's how I suppose it has inspired me. I think it's very hard to say there is a distinctive style. Canadian art in general, Canadian food in general, I suppose it's more like a mosaic. It's combination of different cultures because it is mostly immigrants. I think the West Coast, the people here have possibly been able to incorporate everything in one. And the native people from the West Coast, I think there's a little bit more of it visible. And I think at art exhibitions and, well, what I know, I mean, I'm not Canadian born, so I'm talking from my own experience. I think BC has done a good job of combining it all together. Whether it has a unique quality, I don't know. I think it's hard. Anywhere you go in the world, you know, what is American? What is South African? You know, growing up in South Africa, the native people, a lot of them painted their houses, and Ndebele painted patterns and stuff on their houses. It's hard not to have grown up in that environment and not to be influenced by what they've done. But then to use it in my own work, am I appropriating their stuff, or am I just using what I know in my own work? So I think in BC, or in Canada anyway, it's the same issue. You know, you grow up with the native art around you, even though you didn't do it, your parents didn't do it, and your grandparents didn't do it, it's still there. So how do you distinguish between, are you allowed to use that in your own work, and, you know, is it politically correct? Is it, you know? So I think living in BC, I might not have in my own work that I try, but I don't know, I just haven't achieved it myself. Yeah. I mean, it's just been a very interesting experience doing something totally different, something that I'm not familiar with. I mean, there's a lot of different interpretations in this exhibition, and I think what was quite nice was the fact that the topic is so broad, and there were different approaches to it, and I think that is quite nice about this exhibition, that there's something for everybody. You know, I think the people that have worked on the exhibition have done a really good job. I'm sorry that it isn't a bigger exhibition, and that there aren't more works, and also that it isn't traveling to more places, that the rest of British Columbia can actually see what's being produced here. So yeah, I think in the future, I look forward to maybe them doing it again in the near future.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks.